A little wider, Dan. I'm going.
Now I should just look at you, right? Not, I
Please.
shouldn't be looking at any cameras or anything, right?
Right,
Okay.
just at me.
Right.
We're not here. Okay.
They will keep you in their shot, but you're not supposed to know that. So.
Okay, cameras all set? Okay, we've got Steve, go ahead.
All right. Well, we've just been looking at clips of a young man with hair duck-tailed, coiffed, rolled, coiled all over his head. What a contrast. A lot of us, I guess, had our ducktails once upon a time, Tobias Wolff. Do you actually remember combing your hair back like that and assuming all of the juvenile delinquent James Dean look?
Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah.
We all remember that, don't we?
What is it about hair and our youth that are so intertwined, if that's the word? They really go together, don't they?
Well, I certainly have a fond memory of hair.
Hair was the identifying characteristic. It was the statement, the comb, it was the style. This portrait of 50s life, though, isn't so very different from maybe a portrait of a child growing up today. What are the differences, and maybe what are some of the similarities that make it a more universal story?
Well, I think kids growing up anytime, it isn't easy. But it seems to me that today the stakes are a little higher when kids make mistakes. There's just no kind of slack. It seems the penalties they have to pay for making mistakes now are a lot higher than what I had to pay when I was young. There was a little give in things, you know. You could push the limits a little bit without having a capital punishment be the payoff for it. So in some ways, I think that kids today have a harder time of it than when I was young. But I think a lot of children today, a lot of kids today would recognize what it's like to grow up in a divided family, to be scraping to see ends meet, having a rough time in school, trying to find a way to fit in, trying to find a way to be somebody.
And it was a no-win situation because you apparently needed discipline, and the discipline you got, though, was a kind of a false discipline. It was a discipline with an agenda to it, if we're to believe the movie and the book. That's an insidious thing where a parent can wield an iron hand, but it's not for the betterment of the child. Am I inferring a correct reading of this?
I would say so, yes. I think that the man my mother married was in the grip of his own pathology, really, and that anyone who kind of came within the grasp of his control suffered very badly for it. You know?
And I have to confess, I felt some stark, staring fear during the more combative sequences or in some of those dinner table chats that we see in the film. That kind of fear, was that in your gut as a child growing up in those situations?
Somewhat. Finally, I have to say that I didn't respect him enough to be as profoundly afraid of him as I probably ought to have been, since he was actually a very dangerous person. And I had the cockiness of youth, I think, that I thought that nothing really serious would happen to me in the end. But it was the kind of dailiness of it. It was just so boring always to hear the same things again and again, and so I have to say I took pleasure also in tormenting him after a time. You know, I was not entirely innocent in this arrangement.
And they say you can't go home again, but apparently, if I'm to believe some of the press materials, you and your mother were able to go home again recently, and you found a concrete that astonishingly still looked. Would you tell that story?
Well, with the help of Warner Brothers, it looked almost exactly like it.
What a weird experience.
But you know, it was strange. When I went back to concrete to watch some of the filming last spring, I was astonished to see how much like the concrete I had lived in, or gone to school in. It looked like, and it really hadn't changed that much. Obviously, Warner Brothers, the studio had done some doctoring of the exteriors, but really not that much. And it was the town that time forgot. And it was when I lived there too. It's a real backwater. And I met some of the kids I'd gone to school with, now grown up like me, kids of their own. Some of them were even extras in the movie. They brought their yearbooks along when they heard I was in town, and we looked at the old pictures and talked things over. So yeah, you can go home again.
But it must be strange.
Surprisingly.
They must look at you, though, in a way that's almost alien now. You've come back as if you maybe broke a rule. You left, but maybe you shouldn't come back. Did you sense any of that?
No, not at all. I was made very welcome by everybody I talked to. Even people that I was afraid perhaps would not be happy to see me again were very warm to me and told me, in fact, many of them told me I'd been a little too hard on myself in the book, that I hadn't been that bad a kid. And, you know, I was very touched by the way, the very tender way that people treated me. And I have, since the book came out, actually reestablished my friendship with several of the people I grew up with out there.
Last question, because I hope to get an extensive response on this, but this morning I was interviewing a woman named Joan Pizer, who's just written a biography of George Gershwin. And Gershwin had said, had he not found music, he would have been in jail by the time he was in his late teens. What did you find? Was it literature and books?
Absolutely. And I could make exactly the same claim about writing. Yes, it really was. Stories and language and all the possibilities that opened up for me when I began to read and began to think of this as a possible life and as the best life anyone could live, that made everything possible for me that's happened since. I mean, there's no question at all that it's the only thing I've ever been any good at, the only thing I've ever really wanted to do. And the way my life was going when I was a kid, really anything could have happened, and most of it probably wouldn't have been very good.
Gee, I would think this would make you a hell of a teacher, because there must be a zeal you have for literature now that surpasses merely enjoying it as an academic pursuit.
You bet. Absolutely. I'm something of a missionary on the subject.
But in a sense, I guess I have a few more seconds left. Can you look at this movie as a movie, or is it impossible? I mean,
I think I can, actually. There's enough... there's so much change in the detail, because they had to make it into a movie, that there's enough unfamiliarity in the movie that I do feel like I'm watching a movie when I watch it. I've only seen it once, and I haven't seen the final copy yet. I'm going to see that tomorrow. But I did not have, certainly there were moments, tremendous moments of you know, when I would be shocked by the accuracy of a portrayal as if it were a memory of my own. But it is a movie, you know, and of course it veers into my own emotional territory often, but I quite lost myself in it when I was watching it, just as I would, you know, any other good movie.
And you may have been slipping on that gym floor in your street shoes, but I'd say you sure got back on your feet. It's an amazing story. I want to thank you for the time. Tobias Wolff. We are both in New York City during the biggest blizzard of the century. I'm John Tibbetts for KCTV 5. All right. Great.